Welcome to Washington Today on C-SPAN Radio for Wednesday, November 22nd, 2023. A car rams into a U.S. Canadian border crossing in Niagara Falls, New York, and explodes, killing the two people in the car. New York Governor Kathy Hochul says, based on what we know at this moment, there is no sign of terrorist activity in this crash. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and White House National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan talk about the deal announced last night where Hamas will release some hostages and Israel will pause military operations in Gaza and release 3 times as many Palestinian prisoners. Russian President Vladimir Putin speaks to a virtual meeting of the Group of 20 or G20 Leaders Summit, calling the war in Ukraine a tragedy and saying it was important to think about a way to end it. Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin addresses the virtual meeting of the Ukraine Defense Contact Group, representing 50 countries, telling them none of us want to live in a world where bullies like Putin can invade their peaceful neighbor with impunity. In Utah, Republican Celeste Malloy wins a special election for a seat in Congress. We'll also hear from 2 members of Congress who just announced they are leaving office. Democrat Eshoo of California, retiring after 30 years, and Republican Bill Johnson of Ohio, who is resigning after 13 years to become president of Youngstown State University. And on this 60th anniversary of the assassination of President John F. Kennedy, a preview of 2 special C-SPAN podcasts. Associated Press reports from Niagara Falls, New York, a vehicle speeding toward a U.S. Canada bridge from the American side crashed and exploded at a checkpoint in Niagara Falls on Wednesday, killing 2 people and prompting the closing of border crossings in the area, authorities said. New York Governor Kathy Hochul said there was no indication of a terrorist attack. Much remained unclear about the crash, which investigators were working to understand. Hochul said it wasn't clear whether the driver was intentionally heading for the Rainbow Bridge across the Niagara River when the vehicle hit a median and flew into the air. It prompted the closing of 4 border crossings and raised concerns on both sides of the border. The White House said President Biden was closely following developments, and Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau said officials were taking this extraordinarily seriously. That was from Associated Press. The Canadian Prime Minister, Justin Trudeau, got a question in the House of Commons in Ottawa.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Mr. Speaker, we've just heard media reports of a terrorist attack, an explosion at the Niagara crossing of the Canada-U.S. border. At least two people are dead, 1 is injured. It is the principal responsibility of government to protect the people. Can the Prime Minister give us an update on what he knows and what action plan he will immediately implement to bring home security for our people?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, this is obviously a very serious situation in Niagara Falls. There was a vehicle explosion at the Rainbow Bridge crossing. I've been briefed by the NSIA and the Minister of Public Safety. CBSA, RCMP, and Transport Canada are all fully engaged in providing the necessary support. There are a lot of questions, and we are following up to try and get as many answers as rapidly as possible. We are in close contact with U.S. officials, and we'll continue to work closely with them. We will continue to be engaged. We will provide updates. Updates I can give right now is there are 4 border crossings that are right now closed: Rainbow Bridge, Whirlpool Bridge, Queenston Bridge, and Peace Bridge. Additional measures are being contemplated and activated at all border crossings across the country. We are taking this extraordinarily seriously, and Mr. Speaker, I will have to excuse myself now to go get further updates and work on this very serious situation. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau in the House of Commons in Ottawa. An article in Buffalo News reads, a source with knowledge of the situation who asked not to be identified by name told the Buffalo News that a vehicle approached the American side of the bridge at a high rate of speed while traveling in the wrong lane, the one which vehicles from Canada would be entering the U.S. That the speeding vehicle then hit an obstacle near a U.S. Customs and Border Protection inspection booth and exploded, and reportedly it was the officer in that booth who was injured. About 5 p.m. Eastern, New York Governor Kathy Hochul, Democrat, held a news conference.
At a time when there's such high anxiety, stress levels are already high, and we've been on heightened alert since October 7th. That's why it's so important for me to stand here and tell the world, based on what we know at this moment, and again, anything can change, there is no sign of terrorist activity with respect to this crash. We've identified that this is a local individual, a Western New Yorker. 2 individuals died in the vehicle. The Border Patrol individual working in the booth was injured. The booth literally protected that individual. They went to the hospital with minor injuries and have been released. There is also, again, the busiest travel day of the year. There's a major disruption in, first of all, our cross-border travel. Right now, the Rainbow Bridge will remain closed while law enforcement continues investigation. Again, this is a large, widely scattered scene, and we're trying to identify all the elements to make sure that there is no unforeseen situations that we need to address before we can open again to the public. We're going to make sure the public is safe before they go back on the Rainbow Bridge. Also make sure the structural integrity of the booths, also very important. Our state DOT will be involved in that as well. The Whirlpool Bridge and Lewiston Queenston Bridge opening early this evening, probably open by now. Can anybody confirm that? Yeah. We're open now, okay? They are open now. There's been a lot of people trying to get across. I appreciate that. The Peace Bridge, which was open, is already reopened a half an hour ago. For those traveling by train, unfortunately, Amtrak has temporarily suspended its cross-border service between New York State and Canada. And the Buffalo Airport, despite early reports, the Buffalo Airport was never closed and everything is normal. Domestic flights are still active. There has been no cessation in service there. What I want to do at this time is extend my extreme gratitude to all of our partners, Customs and Border Patrol, Homeland Security, FBI, our state police, local sheriffs, Niagara County, Erie County, all stepped up to assist in trying to identify what exactly transpired here beginning at 11:27 a.m. this morning.
New York Governor Kathy Hochul, Democrat, in a news conference late afternoon. About that same time, U.S. Senator Chuck Schumer, Democrat from New York, posting, "I was just briefed by the FBI on the incident at Rainbow Bridge. Initial reports indicate the 2 people killed were in the car, but nothing's been determined on their identity or motive. They continue to investigate. Law enforcement remains on heightened alert over Thanksgiving." This is Washington Today. And now to the war between Israel and Hamas and the agreement announced late Tuesday that will see the release of 50 hostages held by Hamas, women and children, including reportedly 3 Americans, in exchange for a 4-day pause in Israel's military operations in Gaza and the release of 150 Palestinian prisoners in Israeli jails, all scheduled to start on Thursday. U.S., Egypt, and Qatar acting as brokers of this deal. White House releasing a statement. President Biden spoke with Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu of Israel to discuss the deal to secure the release of hostages taken by Hamas during its brutal assault against Israel on October 7th and the latest developments in the region. And the Prime Minister, Benjamin Netanyahu, held a news conference in Tel Aviv, also mentioning that phone call with President Biden and thanking him and vowing that to eventually have all hostages held by Hamas released. The Prime Minister spoke in Hebrew. You'll hear the English interpretation.
Since the outbreak of the war, we are indeed taking action constantly in order to bring them back home, to bring them all back home. And when I say all, I mean all of them. And that includes Ron and Adar and Abera and Hisham. We've defined the goals of this war very clearly: to obliterate Hamas, to release our hostages, and to guarantee that the day after Hamas, Gaza will no longer pose a threat on Israel. We said that we will do everything we can in order to create the conditions for releasing the hostages. And this is what has happened. What paved the way for this deal is a combination of 2 great efforts. The first effort is massive military pressure, incessant pressure that we exert on Hamas. And I would like to praise the IDF and the ISA for their tremendous activities in order to create this pressure. The second effort is the great diplomatic effort and pressure that we're exerting for the release of the hostages. We were engaged in a very tough negotiations. We were very firm about it. And I just spoke with President Biden a few minutes ago, and I thanked him for everything he did in order to improve the outline of the deal. And indeed, such an improvement was achieved. The combination of the military effort and the diplomatic effort, this is what made the conditions ready for the release of the hostages. And I believe that this combination will enable the return of more hostages in the next stages. The current outline will not include the release of murderers, and it does include the agreement of representatives of the Red Cross for their visits to the hostages and bringing medicines to them. And I've heard that the Red Cross says that they haven't heard about it, but this is the explicit item in the deal. The Red Cross will be allowed to visit the hostages and give them any medicine that they need. And I do expect of the Red Cross to do their job.
The Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu through an interpreter at a news conference in Tel Aviv. The video and the interpreter provided by I-24 News in Israel. CNN writes that the Hostages and Missing Families Forum, a group that was formed in response to the Hamas attack on Israel, has listed 201 Israelis believed to be alive and held hostage in Gaza since October 7th. And the list includes 39 children ages 18 and under, 44 adult women, 89 adult men ages 19 to 64, and 29 people ages 65 and over. And the CNN article also has this: remember, not all of the hostages taken on October 7th are being held by Hamas. Some are held by another militant group, Palestinian Islamic Jihad, and some may be held by other groups or individuals. The White House National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan was interviewed on ABC News' Good Morning America about this hostage release deal.
Are you confident this hostage deal is going to be executed?
Well, you can never have full confidence until you actually see hostages back in the arms of their families. But I am very hopeful that there will be a pause. These hostages will begin to be released. And then I am hopeful that we can build on the release of this initial 50 to get more hostages home so that every last person currently being held by the terrorist group Hamas gets home safely to their family.
What do we know about the American hostages being held, and are any being released?
What we know is that there are 9 U.S. citizens and 1 green card holder who are missing. We don't know for certain that all 10 are still alive, and we've been honest about that, what we know and what we don't know. We know that among those 10, 3 are women and children, 2 women, 1 child, and we believe that those 3 will be among the 50 who are released. But again, George, until we actually see them come out, be in the arms of their loved ones, get home safely, we cannot be fully confident. So we are going to wait as the families are waiting with bated breath until they come out, and then until every last American comes out.
Negotiations have been going on for weeks. What was the key to getting this done?
The key, honestly, was bearing down on both sides, working the United States closely with Qatar and with the government of Egypt to get both sides to essentially get specific. And the big move happened late last week when President Biden spoke first with Prime Minister Netanyahu and then with the Emir of Qatar to say how many hostages for how many days in return for how many Palestinian prisoners. And it was really the work to refine those details that finally produced the breakthrough that we now see resulting in the announcement of a pause in hostilities and the first return of prisoners, of hostages.
The White House National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan interviewed on ABC News' Good Morning America. Some reaction to the hostage release deal from Congress. Max Miller, Republican from Ohio, posting, "The release of 50 hostages is welcome news and something to be thankful for. However, Hamas must not use this pause to rearm. All hostages must be released. Hamas must be eliminated." And from Madeline Dean, Democrat from Pennsylvania, this post, "I'm relieved for the agreed release of 50 hostages, including Americans. This is a meaningful start. At home and in Israel, I met with their families, and my prayers have been with them. To the families, know that Congress is dedicated to the safe release of every hostage. And as Israel works to dismantle Hamas, it is critical to protect civilians in Gaza. Since Hamas's horrific attack, I've called for the release of hostages and a humanitarian pause. I'm grateful to President Biden and the administration for their hard work to make these strides." That from Congresswoman Madeline Dean. Congressman Dean Phillips, Democrat from Minnesota, who is also a 2024 presidential candidate, told CNN Tuesday night that he does not support this deal.
The reporting is that Hamas would release kidnapped Israeli hostages in exchange for a 3-to-1 ratio of Palestinian prisoners, women and minors, children who are in Israeli prison. If you were president of the United States, would you accept that deal?
No, because we have 9 Americans held hostage right now by Hamas, have been there for 6 weeks, including at least 1 child. And by now, I would have expected American special forces to perhaps play a hand in extracting them. I think it's absurd, shocking, and dismaying that 6 weeks later we still have American hostages held by a terror organization in Gaza. I'm happy for the Israelis, don't get me wrong. Hamas should release all hostages. But the fact that we have Americans sitting in Gaza right now held hostage is appalling and should be addressed immediately.
So to be clear, you would turn down even this opportunity to free 50 hostages. And I want to just clarify for the audience, these are Israelis, but some of them are dual citizens. They hold dual passports, including some Americans.
If all Americans are included that are held hostage right now, of course I would approve it. If there's a single American that is still held hostage after this deal, no. I think it's that important, Abby. I think the American president has an obligation to extract Americans. It's been 6 weeks, and I'm happy that some are being released, but every single American citizen should be part of that group. And if I were the American president, I would not agree to anything until every single one of them is released. I would demand it, and if it wasn't done, we have to use every lever available to us to ensure it.
Congressman Dean Phillips, Democrat from Minnesota and 2024 presidential candidate, on CNN Tuesday night. The reaction to the hostage release deal from Hamas. This from Great Britain during Prime Minister's questions in the House of Commons. The Scottish National Party leader Stephen Flynn asking Prime Minister Rishi Sunak, who heads the Conservative Party.
SNP leader Stephen Flynn.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I think all of us in the Chamber are united in our relief at reports that hostages are due to be released by Hamas in Gaza. But we can't afford to lose sight of what comes at the other side of the temporary pause in hostilities that we are about to see. At the end of 4 days, do we simply see the return to the killing of children in Gaza every 10 minutes? Or do we choose in this House to instead back a permanent ceasefire?
Prime Minister.
Well, Mr. Speaker, we do welcome the agreement reached overnight. And as I said, this is something that we have consistently pushed for and is a crucial first step as we try and resolve this situation and indeed the humanitarian crisis in Gaza. Of course, we want to see all hostages released as quickly as possible, including British nationals, and I would urge all parties involved to deliver the agreement in full. I would also like to put on record my thanks to Qatar for their important role, and we will continue to work with the United States and Israel to ensure the safe return of hostages and maximise the opportunity of this temporary pause to step up aid to suffering civilians in Gaza. It is something that we have pushed for, we've continued to do, and the UK is playing a leading role in delivering.
Stephen Flynn.
Mr. Speaker, ultimately it's not a pause in the killing of children that we need. It is an end to the killing of children that we need. And I can think of no better time than now for the Prime Minister to advocate for that permanent ceasefire. But given that he won't currently do that, will he instead lay the foundations for that two-state solution by finally recognising the state of Palestine?
Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, actually what the agreement that has been reached demonstrates that it wasn't right to have a unilateral ceasefire, and what was right was to do, as we have done, consistently push for a pause that would allow not just for aid to reach people in Gaza who desperately need it, but also for hostages to be released. That is what we have pushed for, and I'm glad that that is now being delivered versus a unilateral ceasefire, which would have emboldened and strengthened Hamas. And our position on the Middle East peace process more broadly is clear. We do support a negotiated settlement leading to a safe and secure Israel living alongside a viable and sovereign Palestinian state. I've spoken to President Abbas and met with him to discuss this issue, and we are clear about strengthening the Palestinian Authority and reinvigorating efforts to find a two-state solution. And our long-standing position is that we would recognise the state of Palestine when it best serves the interests of peace.
The British Prime Minister Rishi Sunak questioned by the Scottish National Party SNP leader Stephen Flynn during Prime Minister's question time in the House of Commons in London today. Story from Reuters. Russian President Vladimir Putin told the leaders of the Group of 20, G20, on Wednesday that it was necessary to think about how to stop what he called the tragedy of the war in Ukraine. Some of his most placatory remarks to date about the conflict. Putin's decision to send troops into Ukraine in February 2022 triggered Europe's deadliest conflict since World War II and the gravest confrontation between Russia and the West since the depths of the Cold War. That was from Reuters. Here's President Putin in his first speech to the G20 leaders since the start of the war. It was a virtual meeting.
Some of the colleagues in their speeches and their remarks said that they are shocked by the continuing aggression of Russia in Ukraine. Yes, this is true. Hostility is always tragedy of individual people, of individual families, and for the country in general. And of course, we have to think about how we can stop this tragedy, how we can put an end to this tragedy. And by the way, Russia has never refused to hold peaceful negotiations with Ukraine. It was not Russia, but Ukraine that publicly announced that they are quitting the negotiation process. Even more, they have adopted a decree, they have issued a decree, presidential decree, that bans such negotiations with Russia. I understand that this war, these casualties are shocking, but what about bloody coup d'etat in 2013 that was followed by the war of the Kiev regimes against their own people in Donbass? Does this not shock you? An eradication of civilians, extermination of civilians in the Gaza Strip and Palestine, is this not shocking to you? The fact that the doctors have to operate on children, full-body operations, without any painkillers. Is this not shocking? And the Secretary General of the United Nations, who said that the Gaza Strip turned into children's cemetery, is this not shocking to you?
Russian President Vladimir Putin, part of his speech to the virtual meeting of the G20 summit. President Biden did not take part in today's meeting, and neither did the Chinese President Xi Jinping. The newspaper Independent in Great Britain, writing about President Putin's speech, it appeared that only a handful of countries tuned in to hear him speak, including Spain, Singapore, Bangladesh, Indonesia, Korea, and the host, India. U.S. Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin, who just returned from Ukraine to meet with that country's president and defense minister, spoke today at a virtual meeting of the Ukraine Defense Contact Group, comprising the 50 countries who have been supplying Ukraine with weapons and aid to continue the fight.
For more than 20 months, the people of Ukraine have shown the world the power of a free people to resist Putin's aggression. And Ukraine's fight for freedom matters to us all. As President Biden has said, when tyrants don't pay a price for their aggression, they continue to menace the world. And none of us want to live in a world where bullies like Putin can invade their peaceful neighbor with impunity. And we refuse to let the shape of global security be dictated by autocrats who rely on repression by force at home and coercion by force abroad. We've gathered today because we share a vision for a world that's free, open, prosperous, and secure. And so I'm proud that this history-making contact group has committed more than $80 billion in security assistance to Ukraine since the Kremlin launched its indefensible invasion. And I'm proud of your steadfast commitment. Our unity sends a clear message to Putin that he cannot outlast us or prevail in a contest of wills. And as Putin continues his tragic and unnecessary war, he has been forced to look for support from Iran and North Korea. It was chilling to see a delegation from Hamas, led by one of the terrorist group's leaders, brazenly visit Moscow on October 26 to meet with senior Russian officials. Both Ukraine and Israel are facing relentless foes who are out to annihilate them. And we see that Iran is fueling conflict in both Gaza and Ukraine by arming Hamas and Putin. Iran's support to the Kremlin and Hamas harms Ukraine and harms stability in the Middle East, and it affects the rules-based international order. This is a moment of global challenge. But make no mistake, the United States is fully capable of continuing our strong support for Ukraine, even as we stand with Israel in its hour of need. So as Ukraine faces another winter of war, I urge this group to provide Ukraine with air defense capabilities to protect its people.
Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin, the start of a virtual meeting of the 17th monthly meeting of the Ukraine Defense Contact Group. As Congress is considering President Biden's request for more aid to Ukraine, a new poll from Associated Press NORC Center for Public Affairs Research finds 45% of Americans say the U.S. government is spending too much on aid to Ukraine in the war against Russia, but that's down from 52% who said that in October. 38% say that current spending is about the right amount, and that's up from 31% last month. Wall Street today, the Dow up 184, NASDAQ up 65, S&P up 18. Washington today continues in a moment.
We want to take a minute to ask for your help. Your financial support will ensure that C-SPAN can continue to produce podcasts that inform you about national politics, introduce you to the latest nonfiction books, and provide valuable historical context to today's news. Make a donation today and be a part of C-SPAN's future. Visit c-span.org/donate.
Welcome back to Washington Today, available as a podcast on the C-SPAN Now mobile app and wherever you find your podcasts. Republican Celeste Malloy has won Tuesday's special election for Utah's 2nd Congressional District, getting 57% of the vote against Democrat Kathy Hochul, who had 34%. 5 other candidates split the rest. Celeste Malloy was legal counsel to former Congressman Chris Stewart, also a Republican, who resigned in September after 10 years in Congress because his wife is ill. Celeste Malloy spoke to her supporters Tuesday night.
And none of my family's here tonight because they're all traveling for Thanksgiving, and if I won tonight, they knew that I'll have to travel again in a week to see me be sworn in. So they're not here, so I can get through this without crying, I think. But my family has been, I'm not going to get through this without crying. I have not cried much through this. I've been very steady, but I might be done. My family's been great. They've been so supportive. My friend told me recently that behind every successful politician, there's a surprise family. And I'm going to be using that line from now on because I think I really surprised my family this year. But they just stepped up and supported me and have been great. And so have so many of you. And I've been really careful not to make a lot of promises while I've been running because I've spent enough time around members of Congress to know that it's really tough to deliver on some of those big promises. But one thing I can promise is that I'm going to do everything I can to be the best representative of the people in Utah's 2nd Congressional District. Representing people is a big responsibility. Like the governor said, I'm feeling a lot of that weight right now. And I know that not everybody in the 2nd District voted for me. And I know I haven't met everybody in the 2nd District yet, although I've got to be getting pretty close. But I want everybody in the 2nd District to know that I really do want to be their representative. I want them to know me. I want them to know how to get a hold of me. And I want them to say, that's my representative, and I know she cares about the things that are happening in my town. So that's the promise I am willing to make. Early on in this, a friend of mine said, I think you're going to win, and you're going to do it on the widow's night, and I hope you never forget who put you there. And I can also promise that I'm never going to forget who put me here. I'm really grateful, I'm really humbled, I'm really excited, and I am done giving a speech. Thank you all for being here.
Congresswoman-elect Celeste Malloy, Republican from Utah, in Salt Lake City Tuesday night. Associated Press reports a southern Nevada native and current resident of southwestern Utah Malloy campaigned on improving security on the U.S.-Mexico border, reining in what she calls out-of-control federal spending, protecting religious freedom, and putting Utah more in control of natural resources on its federal lands. Malloy will enter a U.S. House of Representatives controlled by Republicans who in recent months have been roiled by infighting over government spending. Malloy said after her victory, "I know Congress is a bit of a mess right now, and I feel I can go and be helpful and be a good, solid member who is even-keeled and low drama." That from Associated Press. When she is sworn in, expected next week, the U.S. House will have 222 Republicans and 213 Democrats and 0 vacancies. The newspaper Roll Call tracks turnover in the House and Senate by every means you can imagine, including death, expulsion, resignation, seeking other office, or retiring at the end of the term. For the House in this election cycle, there are about a dozen Republicans and 24 Democrats so far on the list. A few members of Congress announced this week they were leaving, including Eshoo, Democrat from California, who put out a video saying she was not going to run again after 30 years serving in the House.
Hello, everyone. I'm choosing this beautiful season of Thanksgiving to announce that I will not seek re-election. And I do so with a heart filled with unending gratitude to you, my magnificent constituents. For 3 decades, you've given me your trust, and I've given every fiber of my being to live up to this sacred trust in every way possible. Whether it's been in community centers, city halls, classrooms, or companies, you've invited me into your lives, your homes, and your hearts. And this has enriched my representation of the most distinguished congressional district in our country. As the first woman and the first Democrat to ever represent our district, I'm very proud of the body of bipartisan work I've been able to achieve on your behalf in the Congress. 66 of my bills have been signed into law by 5 presidents, including the preservation of lands here at home, landmark advancements in women's health, the creation of 2 federal agencies to promote research and development, one to advance biotechnology and one to pursue cures to the deadliest diseases we have yet to conquer, the advancement of high technology for the betterment of society, and key investments in the needs of our local communities, including the single largest investment to combat climate change in our history, the expansion of affordable health care to millions of Americans, and housing for veterans, seniors, the disabled, and families. Over all the years, my legislation and my votes have reflected the values of my constituents: strengthen our democracy, protect our national security, perfect our union by making it fairer for all, and build an economy that lifts up everyone. As my last year in Congress approaches, I will continue my work with vigor and unswerving commitment to you. I salute my superb staff, who consistently uphold the highest standards in their work to serve every single constituent with professionalism, respect, and personal care. Simply put, they are the best. I want you to know you've made me a better person. You have deepened my love of democracy. You have demonstrated the goodness and the decency of the American people over and over again, reinforcing my belief that we are all God's children. So on this Thanksgiving, I will bow my head and say, thank you for choosing me for the high privilege of representing you. May God bless you and your family, protect our troops, and continue to bless the United States of America.
Congresswoman Eshoo, Democrat from California, a video posted Tuesday. She was first elected in 1992, now represents the 16th Congressional District south of San Francisco. Congressman Bill Johnson, Republican from Ohio, announced on Tuesday that he will resign his seat to accept a job as president of Youngstown State University. Bill Johnson served 26 years in the Air Force, then worked as a technology executive before being elected to Congress. He spoke at a news conference at the university on Tuesday.
In 2010, I was encouraged to run for Congress and was elected. I have a great staff. I have a great team. And we've worked hard for the residents of the Mahoning Valley and all of eastern and southeastern Ohio, and I've been honored that the people here have elected me 7 times to be their representatives in our nation's capital. So some of you may ask, then, why would you want to leave the position of congressman to become president of YSU? It's been a huge honor to be considered and offered this position. It fits with my sense of service. Service has been the foundation of my entire career, from the time I joined the Air Force through today. And I see that opportunity for service here at YSU. I also see the prospect to do real good in our community, investing in the lives of students and faculty to ensure our Penguins can pursue their personal dreams and ambitions on their own terms. I know some have questioned my professional and educational experience. It's not the traditional route to this position. I know that. As president, my history in politics will not be reflected in the decisions that I make for YSU or its students here at Youngstown State. I am committed to an inclusive and respectful environment at the university. Regardless of political, religious, or personal affiliations, my focus will be on fostering open dialogue, understanding, diverse perspectives, and contributing positively to the well-being of every student.
Congressman Bill Johnson, Republican from Ohio, at Youngstown State University on Tuesday. An article in the Vindicator newspaper out of Youngstown reads, after an executive session of more than an hour, the YSU Board of Trustees Tuesday agreed in an 8-1 vote to hire Johnson. The decision was met with loud boos from several people who attended the meeting and opposed Johnson's hiring. Mike Peterson, trustees president, said, "We're not hiring a politician, we're hiring a president of Youngstown State University who must work with every YSU stakeholder, students, faculty, staff, alumni, and community partners. We know this decision is not immediately being embraced by everyone, but we also firmly believe that, in short order, Bill will show our YSU family why he's the leader we need right now." A letter from a group of 5 alumni, including Ashley Orr, YSU's only Rhodes Scholar, reads, "The decision to unilaterally select an individual who has wielded the power of the federal government in a polarizing and exclusionary manner is not simply a procedural failing, it is a moral failing." That was from the article in the Vindicator newspaper in Youngstown, Ohio. Today is the 60th anniversary of the assassination of President John F. Kennedy. On 2 new episodes of C-SPAN's Presidential Recordings podcast, you can hear communications between the White House and officials in Dallas about the assassination and the return of the president's body to Washington, D.C. Also, Lyndon Johnson's first address as president to a joint session of Congress, and President John F. Kennedy's last speech ever. Here's a minute of that speech, November 22nd, 1963, before the Fort Worth, Texas Chamber of Commerce.
I'm glad to come to this state, which has played such a significant role in so many efforts in this century, and to say that here in Fort Worth, you people will be playing a major role in the maintenance of the security of the United States for the next 10 years. I'm confident, as I look to the future, that our chances for security, our chances for peace, are better than they've been in the past. And the reason is because we're stronger. And with that strength is a determination to not only maintain the peace, but also the vital interests of the United States. To that great cause, Texas and the United States are committed. Thank you.
President John F. Kennedy had a breakfast hosted by the Fort Worth Chamber of Commerce on November 22nd, 1963, a few hours before he was shot and killed in Dallas, 60 years ago today. Find much more on C-SPAN's 2 special JFK Assassination Anniversary podcasts on our Presidential Recordings podcast feed and wherever you listen to podcasts. President Biden putting out a statement today. In life and in death, President Kennedy changed the way we saw ourselves. A country full of youthful hopes and ambition steeled with the seasoned strength of a people who've overcome profound loss by turning pain into unyielding purpose. He called us to take history into our own hands and to never quit striving to build an America that lives up to its highest ideals. On this day before Thanksgiving, some members of Congress are starting to post their holiday greetings, including Senator Deb Fischer, Republican from Nebraska.
Hi, this is Senator Deb Fischer. This Thanksgiving, Nebraskans will gather with their loved ones to celebrate and give thanks for all of life's blessings. It's also the perfect time to savor the dishes that have become a cherished Thanksgiving tradition for so many generations. In the holiday hustle, I ask you to remember those who may be celebrating alone this year. If you're able to, I encourage you to invite them to join your own celebrations and add a bit of joy to their holiday season. As we approach Thanksgiving Day, I want to express my gratitude to the people of Nebraska. It is a tremendous honor to work for you in the United States Senate. I also want to extend my sincerest gratitude to our brave members of our armed services who keep us safe, especially those who cannot be with their loved ones this holiday. Let us count our blessings and show our love and gratitude to our families, friends, and to this great nation. Wishing you all a Thanksgiving full of joy and laughter. Thank you.
Senator Deb Fischer, Republican from Nebraska, a video posted on X. Thank you for listening to Washington Today. There will not be a program on Thanksgiving or Friday. We will return Monday, November 27th, 5 p.m. and 9 p.m. Eastern on C-SPAN Radio. Listen on our mobile app, C-SPAN Now, or as a podcast. And for more of the stories making headlines in Washington, emailed to you every day, subscribe to C-SPAN's free evening newsletter, word for word. Sign up at cspan.org/connect. Have a good night and happy Thanksgiving.